You're watching PowerNation. Today on Music City Trucks, we get our Bronco closer to done with an AC system, door components, wiring, a cooling system, and the start to our amazing new dash. Man, that looks good in there.
Welcome to Music City Trucks. I'm Brandon Burke.
And I'm Mark Christ. And as you can see, our Beach Cruiser Bronco is coming along nicely. We got it painted up, we got it shined up, and we've got all the drivetrain installed, the axle, suspension, engine, transmission, transfer case. And it looks like we're ready to just start installing body panels, but we don't want to do that just yet because with those out of the way, we can get a lot of other things accomplished. In fact, we've got some things done since you saw it last. We got our Hydro Boost installed here for the final time. We've got the engine wiring harness in there as well as the ECU.
Now that's not the only wiring that's gonna go in this truck. So we have the entire body harness that still needs to get ran and terminated. We still have to wire up the dash and actually just build the whole dash. So we have the original one over there for reference. We even gotta build the doors. So we have most of the components out here on the table. And what we don't have here, we're gonna rob from the original doors as well. Now, the Bronco is a pretty simple vehicle, and you can see all the components that go into just one door.
Yeah, it's a lot of work. I mean, just what you've covered so far. In fact, I made a phone call to one of my buddies. He's gonna be here in just a little bit to help us out. But other than all of that, we still have a ton of plumbing to do, and that's what I'm gonna tackle first. In fact, specifically the AC system. What you see here on the table, we got from Vintage Air. This is a kit for 66 to 77 Broncos. It's a much more modern kit than you would have been able to get back in the 60s and 70s. And if you'll remember, we had a mock-up version of this case here when we did our mock-up, but this one's the real deal. It's got the blower motor in here, it's got the evaporator core and the heater core in there, it's got the plenum and all of the outlets for our ducting. But the coolest part about it probably is that it's all electric. So it's got this little control box here as well as all the servos that modify your doors, your blend door, your temp door, as well as your blower motor speed. So it's pretty cool. But we do have some things we need to do to this thing before we can get it installed for the final time. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that here on the bench, get this thing in the truck.
Man, that's cool.
Brandon's lame joke notwithstanding, one of the things we need to install are the mounting brackets. This bracket, which bolts the unit to the firewall, interferes with the fittings on the heater core, so we need to go ahead and get those fittings installed now. A little ester oil will keep the O-ring from getting pinched during installation. With the fittings tight, we can install that bracket. Since they will be too difficult to put on once the unit is installed, I'll go ahead and get the heater hoses on, leaving them a little long so I can trim them to fit later. And since I mocked this up earlier, all the holes are there, so we just need to get the hardware in. Well, I mentioned I had a buddy coming in. Well, he's here. This is Ben with Smithson Speed and Engineering. Ben, thanks for coming to help us out.
Oh yeah, thanks for having me, man. You got some cool stuff going on. I'm ready to get to work.
Awesome. Yeah, I guess you met Brandon.
Yeah, so we already talked, and I think you're gonna tackle the wiring harness. You got it laid out on the table. I've already started taking the door apart, and Mark, I think there's a whole bunch of stuff under the hood for you to do.
Yeah, I got my hands full over there. It looks like you guys have your hands full too, so I'll let you get at it.
Yeah, I need to get some parts.
All right, so we've got this harness laid on the table. I like to do this every time. We kind of go through it, trim it up, make sure that we've got everything kind of run where we need it so that when we go to install the harness, it makes for a lot cleaner, easier installation.
Oh yeah, that's in pretty good shape. All right, now that I'm done busting my knuckles, getting that old door torn apart, we're gonna be working on the new parts. First thing we're gonna put in is gonna be the window lift channel. And what you're gonna need is this glass setting tape. It's pretty easy to do. All you do is cut it to length. Try not to break the window. Give it a little push. Just kind of shake it on. Just give it a tap with the hammer. All right, before we put that window in the door, I'm gonna actually install the door frame. Oh yeah, very nice. All right, moving on to the vent window. All right, if the sun and the moon align, this should drop right in. Oh yeah. We've eclipsed that part of the assembly and can move on to the latch and linkage. Don't scratch it. As with most of our other restoration components, we got all this stuff from Dennis Carpenter. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, I'm calling the guts of that door done. It's getting there.
Up next, Ben gets the wiring in place and the taillights sparked.
Pull through there. Got him. That should be it. Hold on. All right. Is that good right there?
Yep.
So hey guys, we've got the fuse panel mounted, as you can see. We've got the wires pulled to the front, and we've got them run through the firewall and pulled to the back. So now we're trying to figure out where everything's going here behind the dash. I know it still looks a little rough, but once we test the circuits, get everything pulled where we want, then we can clean it up at that point. But you know, we've got things such as vintage air, we've got aftermarket gauges, aftermarket steering column, transmission controller, and engine controller that all have to be wired up from this chassis harness. So we're getting there, we're pulled wires, and we're gonna get them terminated, and hopefully we'll get this thing started soon. So one of the main causes of wiring frustrations is your grounds. One thing that we make sure to do, as you can see here, is if there is any paint, rust, debris, etc., make sure it's clean. You can see here it's bare metal. We clean it and then we put dielectric grease on it before we land that ground. So we finished pulling our wires from the fuse block back here to the rear of the frame. And now we're going to terminate some wires, put some plugs on, and get this rear body harness buttoned up, see if our taillights work.
This main body harness that we got from Summit Racing is made specifically for 66 to 77 Broncos, and all it requires are the ends to be terminated once you have trimmed them to length. A little dielectric grease in the connectors to keep the moisture out, and we can get the taillight bucket installed.
All right, so we've buttoned the rear wiring up. Let's see if it works. Awesome, great. So the wiring's pretty well finished. There's a few things left undone under the dash. When the guys get the dash finished, they'll be able to plug everything up, get it back in there, and it should be good to go.
Now, unless you have your own repair shop, chances are you don't have a spring compressor like this, nor do you have room for this in your garage. But to replace your struts, there is a better way, and that's with these loaded strut assemblies by Duralast. What's great about these is they are made specifically for your vehicle, so they help maintain OE ride height and quality. And all this black that you see on here, that's not just cheap spray paint, that's rust and corrosion resistant powder coating. Another thing is, because they are completely assembled, they're super quick and easy to install. So if you want to increase the ride quality on your vehicle, you can get a set of these at your local AutoZone. Up next, I tackle our cooling and AC systems. Well, I've been working up front here trying to figure out what we're going to do with all of our plumbing, specifically for the AC system. A big part of the AC system, though, is the heat system as well, which is also part of the cooling system. So I'm trying to figure out the radiator and the condenser. And what we did was we got this radiator. It's a replacement for a 97 T-Bird, as well as the fan, just because it has that nice OEM look and they're easy to mount with these tabs here. So I think I've got figured out how I'm going to mount this. We'll get this in, and then we can connect the rest of the plumbing. It's tight. Well, one of the things when it comes to a job like this that you have to have are the radiator hoses, and in our case, a coolant expansion tank. It's a late model engine, so it's a Coyote, and it has to have an expansion tank rather than an overflow tank. And you have to have special types of connections for the radiator hoses. And this is what we've got right here. All of the stuff that you see here on this cart, we got from rockauto.com. Reason being is because this is all OEM style Coyote stuff for like late model F-150 and late model Mustangs. The expansion tank, this one right here, we got for Crown Vic. So that's very similar as well, and this is for a late model Mustang, this expansion tank here. This is probably the one we're going to go with because it's got the 5/8 nipple here on the bottom for the expansion hose, and then it has the two steam hoses that go in here. One goes to the radiator, and then one goes to the engine, so we'll probably end up having to use this one. This is really going to help with our Bronco to keep it kind of OEM looking under the hood, which is kind of what we're going for. But also us being able to order all of this stuff from Rock Auto makes it really simple because we can just go through the catalog, order a bunch of stuff. It's relatively inexpensive, and then we can just pick and choose what we need. Another thing are the heater hoses. This is OEM style Mustang or F-150 heater hoses. It's got the connectors on here that we're not going to use on the firewall side, but we will need these for the engine side. So we kind of need stuff like this. As a matter of fact, I've got a couple of the heater hoses already installed on the engine. And for the radiator hoses, I've already got these two trimmed up here. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these installed and then fine tune those heater hoses. Looks good. We're just using those OE style heater hoses and trimming them to fit. This one has to be cut right here. One of these heater hoses is 3/4 inch diameter, so we need to install a 3/4 inch to 5/8 inch reducer coupler so we can connect to the fitting on our bulkhead. Well, that pretty much does it for all of the components on our AC system, except for the hoses, of course. Now, you've probably heard lots of terms related to AC systems like compressor, condenser, evaporator, and you may not know what those components are, what they do, or even where they're located. So we put together something fun to show you how it all works. It all starts with the compressor, which is driven by the belt and draws in the refrigerant through the suction line. It then compresses that refrigerant and sends it into the discharge line, which dumps into the inlet of the condenser. The condenser works like a radiator and is the part that mounts in front of your actual radiator. Its job is to condense that hot, high-pressure gas into a liquid. It does this by cooling the refrigerant down via ambient air, passing over the fins and tubes. From the condenser, this liquid refrigerant collects in the dryer, which also acts as a filter for the system. From there, the refrigerant travels through the liquid line to the expansion valve. This valve meters the amount of refrigerant that is released into the evaporator core. This is where the magic happens. As the refrigerant begins to expand from a liquid to a gas, it rapidly cools. The blower motor in the evaporator case pushes air across the tubes and fins of the evaporator and is cooled as a result. At this point, the cooled air is blown through your vents and into your interior. Well, now you're up to speed on AC systems and how they work. Let's get back to getting this thing all wrapped up. All that's left is going to be a little bit of plumbing. I went ahead and got all of the components reinstalled, and I made a couple of the lines already. I made the number 8 discharge hose that comes out of the compressor, flows into the condenser here, got that installed and tight, as well as the number 6 hose that comes out of the condenser and goes into the dryer. Now it's time to make the liquid line. You'll notice there's a lot of plumbing under the hood of this truck, and we're not done yet. So keeping all of these hoses routed neatly is key. I'm indexing the hose with a marker so I can crimp the end, which is actually pretty satisfying. Well, this is the last hose, and this is actually the final hose that the refrigerant travels through as it goes back into the compressor to be cycled again and to cool the vehicle. Now that does it for the AC, except for one thing, and that's the controls. Up next, we're getting started on our dash. Man, that looks good in there. A common problem with early Broncos is if you run a full cage like we're doing, even if you put that bar out as far as you can here against the dash, it interferes with the glove box door and you can't open it all the way. There are several ways to fix this, but in order to maintain the build quality that we want on ours, I think what I want to do is just cut out the glove box door and move it down. We could eliminate either the ashtray or the speaker grate here, but since we're going with an aftermarket stereo and some bigger speakers, we're not going to need the speaker grate anyway. So what I'm going to do is cut that out, move everything down, patch the hole. I'm going to go ahead and use my patch I cut here to mark how much material to remove. The masking tape will be my guide, and the cutoff wheel, my tool of choice. It's a little warm. Fits. I can fill that in with some TIG and be good as new. The TIG welder is perfect for this job because it's easier to control the heat and the amount of filler. And since this dash is not a structural component, light penetration is all we need. All right, well, that's gonna go just like that. And once we get it in the truck with the roll bar in there, we didn't tell you, you'd never know that we moved the glove box. But, well, you'll know, but that'll be our little secret. Well, Brandon did a fine job getting our dash all painted up, as you can see, and you can't even tell that we moved the glove box over and eliminated that speaker vent there, which is what we were going for anyway. Now, as far as things that we're going to be retaining off of our original dash, not much. The glove box door, the ashtray, which we've got set aside because we need to get those cleaned up and painted as well, but then also our defrost duct here, which I'm going to install first. Well, the next thing is going to be our instrument cluster. We went to Classic Instruments for one of their 6-pack kits, 466 to 77 Bronco. What's great about this is, unlike the factory cluster, this actually has the tack built in. That's why they call it a 6-pack, because it's got the speedo, tack, oil pressure, fuel, battery, and temp. Of course, the odometer as well. And we took ours a step further, which they'll do this for you too. And we got the logo installed there onto the face, which we think is a really nice touch. Costs you a little more, but it's totally worth it. This thing is completely digital, and it even has a little connector in the back, and you can get that wired into your harness, which Ben has already done on ours. So this thing just needs to bolt right in, and it just installs in the factory location. My favorite thing about this is that it looks factory, so at a glance, you don't even realize that it's aftermarket. Well, that looks awesome, as I knew it would, but the next big thing that we're going to be installing in our dash is going to be something we don't do that often, and that is a radio. We went to RetroSound for one of their Motor 4 radios. This is kind of their top of the line model. It does a little bit of everything. It's compatible with Sirius XM. It's got the little jack here, so you can hook that up if that's what you like to listen to. Or if you want to hook something up through the USB, you can hook it up there. It also has auxiliary cables. It has an external mic, so if you want to talk on the phone through the radio like you would a modern vehicle, it's got that feature. It's got 6 preamp outs, so you can hook it up to an amp, which we're going to be doing later on our Bronco. And then, of course, it's got your regular radio features like an AM, FM. So if you want to just listen to the regular radio, you can do that as well. I'm just going to get this thing installed, and pretty soon we'll be getting that dash in the truck. We're installing this in the factory location, and coincidentally, this radio looks remarkably similar to an original Ford radio. Now for all the OE stuff, we went to Dennis Carpenter yet again. Of course, this is just a small assortment of what we're going to be installing on the dash here. We've got the dash control lights here, bezels, ignition lock cylinder, all the knobs and everything to make this dash look brand new. Ooh.
All right.
Man, that looks good in there.
Yeah, the dash is like half the interior.
It really is.
This being installed, and we couldn't install the dash without, Ben, you putting in the wiring harness, which is like the biggest job on this truck. So, thank you.
Yeah. No problem. I appreciate you having me out here. That dash looks killer. That white against that green. This is turning out awesome.
If you can't get enough of our Bronco, go to PowerNationTV.com and check out our Beach Cruiser Bronco project page.
We have current build status, before and after pics, links to parts used, and all the episodes right there on one page.